Hello everyone, my name is Sydney Pekka. I chose to focus my final project on three people whom I deeply admire for the beauty of their work, but even more than that, the underlying messages their work sent to the world. These three people were pioneers for their time in terms of artistic work, and their talent made people stop for a moment to look, listen, and read in awe. And not only that, their work has been something that the world has been able to study, enjoy, and learn from for centuries after their deaths. Diego Rivera, Federico Garcia Lorca, and Celia Cruz have truly left their mark on this world, and they were able to give something powerful to people they cared about. These three artists were able to give a voice to the marginalized and show the truth, and it was in this truth that they left their mark on all of humanity. So to start out with, I just have some pictures of the three people that I will be talking about. And the top left is Celia Cruz, in the middle is Federico Garcia Lorca, and on the right we have Diego Rivera. So I will start out with Diego Rivera. He was born in Guanajuato, Mexico in 1886, and Rivera showed an immense amount of talent for drawing at an early age. At the age of 10, he went to study at the San Carlos Academy of Fine Arts in Mexico City. In 1907, he traveled to Europe to further his art studies and befriended many leading artists of the day, one of the most notable being Pablo Picasso. In 1929, he married Frida Kahlo, the most famous female Mexican surrealist painter whom he had a very tumultuous marriage with, and who was the subject of many of his paintings. Okay, so world events like the Mexican Revolution and political ideas like communism strongly influenced Diego's style and subject of work. Rivera wanted to make art that reflected the lives of the working class and native people of Mexico. His murals and portraits represented his individual values because of the subjects he paints. The people in his murals and paintings represent the working class of Mexico and the native people whose land and lives were taken by the Spanish invaders. They also represent the different classes of people and how they are treated differently. Diego believed in equality and justice for these people, and is depicted in his mural that was painted in the Manhattan's Rockefeller Center. The mural was destroyed because of Diego's painting of Vladimir Lenin, a Russian communist politician. Diego had a vision of the importance of technology in the future and the hope that there would be a coming together of workers, industrialists, and businessmen to further mankind. So in the picture we can see, if we zoom in, under the top right wing, right below that is the painting of Vladimir Lenin. And it was very common for that time because it was communism was seen as something that was scary and bad, and the United States did not want any part of communism. It was seen as a threat to capitalism. So to continue his paintings, this is one of the famous paintings on the left, is The Flower Carrier by Rivera. And both of these paintings are very similar in that they have similar subjects and similar meanings and symbolism behind them. So, for example, on the left, we have a man carrying a basket of flowers on his back, and the flowers, as you can see with the basket, are a lot bigger than the man. Same thing with the woman on the right. And Diego did a really good job using proportionality with his paintings, and he was able to represent how the working class, they had a lot of burdens and problems and a lot of injustice and inequality in their lives, and this is this meaning behind these paintings. So this is one of Diego's most famous murals. So it's titled Dream of a Sunday Afternoon at Alameda Park. This mural is a representation of three distinct and historical time periods in Mexico, as well as classes of people. On the left of the mural, Rivera paints the conquest of the Aztec Empire by Hernan Cortez, as well as other historical figures. And in the center of the mural, Diego Rivera's the little boy. So the picture in the bottom right, we can see Diego as a little boy, and in the middle is Frida Kahlo, and then on the right is the figure La Catrina. So Frida Kahlo, the famous surrealist painter and wife of Rivera, is also holding the yin and yang symbol. So the colors are very bright and are used to show the traditional clothing of Mexican people as well as those of a higher class. The mixture of people shows the very tumultuous and controversial past and present of Mexico. And the mural reads almost like a book from left to right, So if you look at the picture in the top middle is the full mural, and if you read it from left to right, it's like the history of Mexico. So we have like on the left, we have indigenous people. In the middle, we have the bourgeois, we have La Catrina, and on the right is the Mexican Revolution. So the importance of his work, it gave a voice to the working class and a voice to the indigenous population and native people of Mexico. It brought attention to political problems, inspired government programs such as U.S. President Roosevelt's Federal Art Project, which employed artists to paint scenes of everyday life on the sides of buildings, much like Rivera did with his murals. Influenced later painters and muralists, and it took art out into the public domain, which is something that, or it's something that everyone could enjoy for that time, not just the elite. So to continue, we have Federico Garcia Lorca. Lorca was born on June 5th, 1898. He was a Spanish playwright, poet, and theater director. He was born in a small town close to Granada, Spain, and his father was a wealthy landowner and his mother was a teacher. In 1919, Lorca moved to Madrid, Spain to attend the University of Madrid, and it is there that he met Luis Buñuel and Salvador Dali. Lorca was a member of Generation 27, a group of poets who introduced certain movements such as symbolism, futurism, and surrealism into Spanish literature. And his writings were censored by the Franco regime, and they placed a ban on his work that was not rescinded until 1953. And he was executed by nationalist forces at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War, and his body was never found. So expressions of individual and human values. So Lorca was very unique in that his literature focused a lot around taboos, so especially sexuality, and it's very evident in many of his poems and works, especially his play El Público and his poem Romance Soniambulo, which I have an example of next. And he makes references about the being in love with someone that is green. And not only that, Lorca believed in political freedom and being able to speak and write about it openly and freely. He never identified with one particular party, but instead said that he was a combination of many different parties all put into one. And then, last but not least, we have this rehumanization that was kind of a term that Lorca coined himself. And it's very evident in his poem Poeta en Nueva York. And Lorca was very concerned with the rehumanization of poetry and not the dehumanization of it. So meaning he wanted to put human qualities back into poetry. So here we have an example of his work, Romance Soniambulo. So the highlighted parts that I have right here, is referring to green. So again, we see this green wind, green branches, all this green. Green, how I want you, green. So obviously he is referring to someone, and has this green has sexual references to it, which have been said to be referencing homosexuality. And also in Romance Soniambulo, I don't have an example of it specifically right here in writing, but he uses juxtaposition a lot. So he says the stiff wind, and he states big hoarfrost stars come with the fish of shadow. So we have stiff wind next to each other, and we have stars and shadow in the same stanza, and so, in the same line. So he just creates this very kind of opposite picture in people's minds, and it's a very surrealistic quality of his writings. So the importance of his work, even though he lived a very short life, Lorca was an extremely accomplished and talented man. He contributed to the world of literature in many different ways with his poetry and playwrights. Lorca pushed boundaries and focused on many taboo subjects for his time, specifically on sexuality and politics, and he put homosexuality into the spotlight and gave a voice to other people like him, and other people who had the same thoughts, feelings, and desires but were too afraid or scared to ever admit it because it was a crime for that time. And I really think that this quote right here really sums up what Lorca was all about. So to burn with desire and keep quiet about it is the greatest punishment we can bring on ourselves. So I think it's a pretty inspiring quote. So last but not least, we have Celia Cruz. So Celia Cruz, who I think is super cool and super fun, was born on October 21st, 1925, in a diverse and working class neighborhood of Santos Suarez in Havana, Cuba. She's one of the eldest of 14 children, and she often had to put her siblings to bed by singing to them. She was a Cuban American singer and one of the most popular Latin artists of the 20th century. She's known internationally as the Queen of Salsa. So her expressions of individual and human values. So Celia's music contains many expressions of individual values and human values. Through her work, she expresses the importance of culture and embracing it and being proud of it. She uses her culture to transmit a certain kind of sound to her audience, especially through the use of her different kinds of instruments, specifically the different types of drums. So her songs also center around the topics of perseverance, especially in times of hardship. When Celia's mom died, she was unable to return to Cuba for the funeral because Fidel Castro forbade it. And she was also, so since she was also she was also a child in a family of 14, she had to work extremely hard in her life, and she had to make her way in this world and provide for herself financially. So she was very self-efficient. So a few of her songs we have that I really like and show these expressions are Quimbara, which really represents the Cuban culture, Bemba Colora, which focuses on anti-racism, Perseverance, her song I Will Live On, and I have an example of her song right here, but I am running out of time, so I will not be able to play it for right now. So Quimbara, there's no literal translation for this. It's a combination of Cuban and African culture that reflects Celia perfectly. She repeatedly yells azúcar in the song, which stands for sugar, but it's a reference to the African slaves who worked on the sugar plantations in Cuba. So yes, it speaks of Celia's homeland of Cuba, and it's very, it puts Cuba in the limelight. So the importance of her work, she's a female in a male-dominated profession. She uses the mixed cultures to transcend her sound. She made salsa famous. She made it something that became worldwide and kind of a phenomenon. She brought attention to the Latino culture and gave a voice to immigrants, Latinos, and also Cuba. It put Cuba in the spotlight, and she was able to be the voice for a small part of the world, and but that small part of the world kind of was able to branch out into the whole world. So to sum up, I really just wanted to highlight the differences between the three, but also then in the middle, the important part of this entire presentation. So Diego Rivera, again, painter, muralist, communist supporter, political activist, voice for the working class and voice for the native people. Celia Cruz, she's a musician, born in Havana, Cuba, Afro-Cuban, queen of salsa, and a voice for Cuba, Latinos, and immigrants. And then Federico Garcia Lorca, he was a poet, playwright, and theater director, member of Generation 27. He was executed for his sexuality, and he was a voice for homosexuals, and he put homosexuality into the spotlight and made it something that people talked about. But to conclude with, all three of these artists were voices for the marginalized. They were voices for people who didn't have a voice for their time. And they did it in a wholly unique way. And they used it to benefit mankind, I truly believe. And I'm inspired by all three of them. And I hope to continue to learn about all three of them. Thank you for listening.